Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our presentation today on professionalism and codes of conduct. Okay, let's get down to our presentation then. So we're looking at professionalism and codes of conduct. And most people sort of look at this and say, well, why do we even need to look at this topic? Main reason that we look at professionalism is because having a professional and an ethical reputation is the difference between success and failure. You can be as technically competent as you like, but true success comes along with having both technical competence as well as a professional and ethical reputation. What is professionalism? It's not an easy thing to define because it goes beyond a simple checklist. It has to do with the way you conduct yourself in the workplace, and even beyond that, how you conduct yourself in your daily life. But if we have a look at the definition here, there's some idea of what it means to be part of a professional community. Things such as competence, integrity, accountability, and high ethical standards. In the engineering and geoscience fields, as in many other international fields of practice, professionalism is often based on three pillars: registration, continuing professional development, and then ethics and professional conduct. So the first one we'll have a look at is registration. Now, in South Africa, registration falls into two categories: statutory registration and then membership with a professional body, which is also a voluntary association. Question often asked is, well, what's in it for me? Why would I want to be registered? Well, primarily it's because it provides a certain level of formal international recognition of your knowledge and experience. And in South Africa, registration with a statutory body is becoming more and more required for every field of work. Another reason is it tells your employers, your clients, and even the general public that you have the academic qualifications, the necessary practical experience to do the job that you say that you can do. So it gives them confidence to hire you, knowing that you are what you say you are. And it will also be of use when you're in the running for promotion. Now, as geologists, you might typically be involved somewhere down the line in the estimation of mineral resources and reserves on a mine. And you might need to, be called upon at some stage to sign off as a competent person on a public report. And if you need to do so, you will have to be registered with one or other professional or statutory body. I want to highlight this comment down here. Registration does not necessarily mean that you are competent or that you can do the job. It just says that you have the necessary knowledge and the skills to do it. And we'll talk a little bit later about competence. So the first thing we want to look at is statutory registration. This is governed by the South African Council for Natural Scientific Professionals. It falls under the Department of Higher Education, Science and Innovation. Now, the SACNAS Act 2003, they have a mandate to register, to regulate, and to enable. And that means that they are there to set the standards and improve the standards of people who are registered in that particular field. Initially, the intent of Section 18 was that all practicing geoscientists would need to be registered. But then Section 20 came along and muddied the waters by referring specifically to consultants. And this has created a bit of a loophole where only certain people think that they need to be registered and others not. And that is being addressed by the Natural Scientific Professions Bill, originally started in 2019 and may come out in 2026. This will become the act in due time. What's different about this act than the current one is that it provides jurisdiction over all natural scientists. So it's not specific to consultants. You as a practicing geologist, irrespective of where you work and what you do, will need to be registered with SACNASP. It goes even further because it provides for action against employers who employ unregistered natural scientists. So it speaks right to the companies that will employ scientists, geoscientists. They will be responsible for making sure that you as a practicing geoscientist are registered. It also creates an identification of work and the levels of competency required. In fact, most of you who are registered with SACNASP will have received notification of the identification of work that is in the process of being put together. A third thing that the new bill does is it allows the board to publish findings of disciplinary proceedings. Up until now, if a person is subject to a disciplinary hearing at SACNASP, nobody ever hears about it. But under the new bill, the board will be allowed to publish these things so that people will be able to see who has been disciplined for what misstep. So the benefits of SACNASP registration, well, as we've mentioned, it's a legal requirement. Registration is recognized on all stock exchange jurisdictions as a recognized professional organization. It has a code of conduct that is benchmarked against international standards. It has an operational CPD system. It gives you mentorship or access to mentorship through the candidate mentorship program that runs with the GSSA. And it also gives you access to cheaper professional indemnity insurance. You can register with SACNASP in one of these three different categories. But this is the one that most scientists will aspire to. It's the professional category. And it's only this professional category that can sign off on stock exchange requirements. And the requirements to register as a professional is a recognized 4-year degree or equivalent and 3 years practical experience in the work that you are doing. There is an option for recognized prior learning. You also need to continue with your CPD if you want to maintain your registration. Many of you here will be at this level, either registered as candidates or will register as candidates, where you need a degree or a diploma or equivalent. You do not need any work experience, but you will require a certain level of CPD to upgrade to PR Signet. This is not currently in place, but watch the space for more information in due course. There is a student enrollment initiative which allows all final year students to enroll for free. And this gives you access to what is happening within SACNASP. Ernest, you don't have audio. Can everybody else hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Tanya.
Okay, Ernest, I think it probably is your system. So you might want to check down at the bottom, click on the audio, the little arrow next to audio, and select a different speaker. So those of you who are final year students, you can join SACNASP for free. and start getting into the whole system. In addition to statutory membership or statutory registration, one can also be a member of a professional body. Now, the Geological Society is both a professional as well as a scientific organization. And what this does is it gives you a professional home. Now, as a voluntary association, the Geological Society is associated with SACNASP, so it represents your interests on the SACNASP Council. And this we do because we have a member who sits on the SACNASP Council and can bring all the issues that we face as geoscientists to SACNASP's attention. We also have various other associations with local, regional, and international professional bodies. In fact, the GSSA this year is chair of the Global Geoscience Professionalism Group. Being a member of the GSSA, you require a geoscience degree, and the frame of reference is the Constitution, and the norms and behaviors, again, are benchmarked against international geoscience practice. This slide here highlights some of the basic services that we provide to our members. I'd like to encourage you to become familiar with these, what they mean for you, and how they can benefit you. We have a continuing professional development site where you can log your activities, access to meetings. We have both free and paid events, networking events as well. If you look at the branches and divisions, there's something for everybody along the road. The REI Fund allows you as GSSA members to access funds for research activities. If you want to attend an international conference, there's the geology. We are also a recognized professional organization. That means that if you belong to the GSSA, you can write or sign off on documentation as competent persons. We also provide mentorship opportunities both through the SACNASP mentorship program as well as an independent one. Become familiar with what we can provide as members of the GSSA. We look at the membership categories within the GSSA. It's the corporate membership. That's your standard member or fellow. There's membership with chartered status. I'll come back to that in a moment. There's student membership, which is free for students. Institutional membership for organizations, companies, and then affiliate membership for those who might not be geoscientists, but who have an interest in the geosciences. So there's something for everybody with respect to a membership category. We mentioned chartered status. If you as a geoscientist wish to use your GSSA membership to sign off on public reports, then you will be required to obtain chartered status. This is not relevant for people who are registered with SACNASP. If you are registered with SACNASP, you typically use your SACNASP registration. But there's nothing stopping you from being a chartered member either. This was specifically created for members who live and work outside of South Africa, who do not need SACNASP registration, but still need to be registered somewhere in order to sign off. Not only resources and reserves, but if you're signing off in terms of the UNSC resource reports for the European Union, if you are an academic or researcher, somebody who does not generally do competent persons reports, but wishes to do one every now and again, they need to be chartered members if they're going to use their GSSA membership. It's important to note is that if you are a member of the GSSA, converting to chartered status is free. It does not cost you anything in addition to being a member. It does, however, require that you fulfill all these obligations. But when you look at a voluntary association, it's not all about what the association can do for you. It's also about what you as a professional geoscientist can contribute to the industry. I'm thinking here specifically in terms of providing mentorship, being role models, and also examples of professionalism to others. Okay, we have a question. Sibanye-Stillwater have a challenge in that, amongst others, we are using linked learning as platform for ongoing training. Go about getting CPD recognition for such training, or how do we have it assessed? Okay, the short answer for that is Sibanye-Stillwater can either send the documentation to SACNASP and they will assess it. You can also send it directly to me and we'll see how we can assist you with that. Probably the easiest thing to do is to attend the EPD course that we have in March of every year. That'll give you some detail as to how we do it. But what I suggest you is send me an email with what you're wanting to do and how you want to do it, and then I'll be able to get back to you with specifics. Okay.
Thank you. Will do.
But so we mentioned earlier that simply because you are registered as a professional geoscientist with SACNASP, or you're a member of a professional body, does not mean that you are necessarily competent. What's the difference? In order to register, that says that you have the academic qualifications that you say you have. It says that you have the work experience that you say you do. And it says that you have sufficient practical and technical experience to do the job. Being competent, however, is actually being able to do that job, not just have the qualifications, but actually be able to do it with ever-increasing levels of proficiency. Competence is comprised of knowledge, information, and attitude. It's often compared to an iceberg, where the things that people can see, our knowledge and our skills, only makes up a small proportion of what it is to be competent. By far the larger portion, that which people don't see, is down to our attitudes, our values, our personal standards, and our ethics. This is the bit that is reflected in our professionalism. They mostly go unnoticed, except when they let us down. Okay, so knowledge. Knowledge is based on qualifications. But I'm sure you would have noted that simply because people have qualifications does not necessarily mean that they can actually do things well. What I want to highlight is this quote by Eric Hoffer some years ago. In times of change, the learned shall inherit the earth. The learned find themselves beautifully prepared to deal with the world that no longer exists. So once we have acquired knowledge, we just cannot stagnate. We can never stop learning, or we're very quickly going to become out of date. We'll pick up this theme a little bit further in the next section on CPD. So moving on to skills. Skills refer to the ability to apply our knowledge to a specific situation. You can't develop skills without knowledge. Knowledge is typically about information that you have learned, whereas skills imply something practical. It's something that you learn in order to be able to carry out your job function. Simplistically, we can divide skills into two categories: the technical or hard skills, and then the soft skills. Hard skills, well, these are the technical knowledge, the training that you've all gone through. They are occupational skills that are taught in a classroom. They're generally job specific. An example might be computer skills, what software programs you're working with, data analysis, and so forth. Soft skills, by contrast, are non-technical skills, and these generally don't relate directly to your job. They general characteristics that help you to thrive and improve in a workplace. They're very transferable, they're interpersonal, and they include such things as communication skills, critical thinking, decision-making ability, and various management, business, and leadership skills. Technical skills can easily be defined and measured. Soft skills are often tangible and quite difficult to quantify, but at the same time, they can be more important to success than technical skills. And here I'd like to refer you to a study done some years ago at Harvard, Stanford, and Carnegie universities. And that showed that only 15% of job success is related to technical knowledge and hard skills. An overwhelming 85% of job success comes from having well-developed soft skills and interpersonal skills. Now, geoscientists are typically hardwired to the practical aspects of their job and are generally very good at the technical skills. So developing these soft skills is something that everybody needs to work on obtaining. They're also seldom taught at universities, and this is where you need to go outside of your formal education to develop these skills. There's a time element involved in becoming proficient. By and large, the more you do something, the better you should be at it. Simply because a person has been doing something for 20 years does not necessarily mean that they are proficient at it. And the reality is that over your career, you are going to meet people who have been around for many years. They may even be in senior positions at your place of employment, but they're still not necessarily proficient at what they do. Another thing to note about becoming proficient is that it's not the same time for everybody or for every skill. Some people can become proficient in one skill in a very short space of time, whereas others might take much longer to get to that same level. Or you can become proficient at one skill very quickly, but another skill might take you much longer to master. These here are some of the attitudes that we want to develop as part of our competence. As you read through that list there, you'll note that these are not geoscience-specific skills. These are attitudes that you are going to need to blossom in all aspects of your life, not only in your working life, but also in your private life. Okay, before we go on, do we have any questions about registration? Okay, so the next pillar that we have a look at is continuing professional development. If you look at this, it says knowledge or half-life of knowledge is 8 years. So after 8 years, half of what you know will be forgotten, irrelevant, or just plain useless. Now, whether it be 8 years, 8 days, 8 weeks, or whatever, knowledge has a half-life. If you don't keep up with what's happening in your field, all the stuff that you learned at university will be irrelevant because life goes on, I'm sure you can all see how things have changed in the years since you have left university. Many of you may have used logarithmic tables at school. Then we moved on to calculators, typewriters versus word processors versus computers. We started off with mainframe computers that took up 3 floors of a building. And now your phone has greater computing power. And everybody can just look at how artificial intelligence has changed the way we do many things just over the last year or so. So you need to be able to keep up with what is happening that is applicable to your field. CPD is what the term that we use to describe learning activities. It's everything that you do beyond your initial training. In other words, everything that you do after you get your degree. Once you have got your basic degree, any skills, knowledge, or experience that you gain after that is part of your continuing professional development. And so when we look at what it comprises, it's the formal courses that you go on. It's the informal learning that you do. Any sort of vocational education or adding of new skills is part of your continuing professional development. And when we talk about logging our CPD, all this it's a record of what we've done. You can keep it as a physical logbook, on a spreadsheet. Most professional organizations will give you a portal on the website where you can continue to do it. So when we talk about CPD, it's doing things and then logging it. Can professionals who are not in South Africa apply and register for GSSA and SACNAS? Short answer, yes. If you're not in South Africa or working in South Africa, SACNAS registration is not required because that is required specifically for South Africans. But you can, there's nothing to stop you from doing so. And yes, you may apply and register for the GSSA. At least 15% of our GSSA members are either regional members or completely international members. And using your GSSA membership, you can sign off on documentation at pretty much all stock exchange jurisdictions. Some of the key features of CPD, you decide what you want to do. Your employer doesn't determine what CPD courses you do. The GSSA or SACNAS doesn't give you a list of courses that you have to do. You decide what you want to do to develop your personal development. CPD also includes formal and informal learning. But it's not just something that happens haphazard, that you just happen to do things. You need to plan your program as to what you want to do to improve your abilities and keep yourself up to date with the advancements in your field of practice. And CPD can be improving your technical knowledge. It can be improving your abilities in software. The important thing I want to highlight is that you direct it. Nobody else tells you what courses you've got to take. Now, many people, or many GSI, are registered both with SACNAS and also with the Geological Society of South Africa. Both of these organizations have online portals for your CPD credits. If you had to go and log all your SACNAS points on the SACNAS website and then your GSSA credits on your GSSA website, well, that becomes just a complete mission. Much of it is duplicated, and it just gets very confusing. So what we have done with SECNISP is we've written an MOU with them to avoid duplication. So if you log your CPD on the GSSA system and you're compliant with the GSSA system, you will be deemed to be compliant with SECNISP, and vice versa. Under the SECNISP system, there are 3 categories in which you can log your activities. There is a 5-year CPD cycle. You need to obtain 25 credits in a 5-year cycle. And this is the date of the current cycle from April 2022 to March 2027. So we said there were 3 categories. You have to obtain at least 1 credit in the formal learning category, and the others can be obtained elsewhere. The GSSA system, by contrast, we have 4 different categories, but no category is obligatory. We don't say that you have to collect credits in the formal learning section. You can collect them across the spectrum as you are able to. We encourage you to collect points in every single category, but that is entirely up to you depending upon your abilities. And Catherine has a question. If you registered last year, you're still going to fall within the 2027 cycle. With SECNISP, it's a 5-year cycle from when you have last registered. So if you registered last year, you will have 5 years. It will be 2029. It's a 5-year cycle. Here are some of the things that you can register your CPD on. Under formal learning, it's any sort of courses that you attend, postgraduate degrees, formal internships. Under knowledge contribution, the time taken to prepare and present a course or whatever, leading field trips, writing academic papers, so forth. Also, if you happen to be a student who is involved with teaching assistance and postgraduate demonstration, you can also collect CPD credits for that. Then there's the informal learning, as well as things that you do as part of your professional practice. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in March of every year, we have a detailed CPD course. So if you want to hear more about the details of both the GSSA and the SECNISP one, please look out for that and attend that. Ken Otendo says, what happens if you don't collect the 25 credits or the credits are over 25 without one of the categories in a 5-year cycle? What if you don't get your SECNISP credits and you're registered with SECNISP? SECNISP will write you a nasty letter saying you have not done your 25 credits. Please make sure that you do so forthwith if you wish to continue to be registered with SECNISP. And the same thing with category 1 in a 5-year cycle. What happens if you don't collect 60 CPD in a year of that? Okay, now, let me go back here a bit. If you are registered with SECNISP, you have a 5-year cycle in which you need to get 25 credits, 5 of which must be in the formal learning category. And if you don't get all of your CPD credits the way it should be, when it comes to renew your registration after 5 years, SACNASP will insist that you catch up on your CPD credits before you're allowed to re-register. If you're doing your registration on the GSSA system, we don't have a 5-year program. This is your objective, is to get to 60 CPD. But we know that some years people can do an awful lot of CPD and some years you don't. So we don't get bogged down on the 5 years. We'll present your certificate in 5-year batches so that you can upload it to the SACNASP website, but it is not required in terms of 5 years. How are CPD points allocated? For example, if I contribute to SAM codes, how will I know how much CPD? There's external training, of which is not training. Okay, answer the second half first. External training doesn't matter whether it's supplied by GSSA, SACNASP, or SAIMM. You can do your training in anywhere, third-party conferences, international online conferences. That doesn't matter at all. You just make sure that training event is accredited either by SACNASP or by the GSSA, and then you can claim it. With respect to claiming the points, when you log your points on the GSSA system, you put in the amount of hours that you have done that activity, and the website calculates the number of points that you get for it. And then you have a dashboard there which will show you how many points you've got for each event that you've attended. How do you prove that you have read relevant scientific journals and upload the evidence for claiming points? If you're doing it for the GSSA, we don't ask you to provide evidence. We believe you. SACNASP, however, is not so forgiving, and you will probably have to upload the scientific journal to the SACNASP website as evidence that you have read it. That answer all of your questions regarding cycles and CPD credits. Okay, the third pillar of professionalism is ethics and professional conduct. We'll come back to ethics a little bit later. I'd like to spend some time looking at conduct that might be considered professional or even non-professional, as the case may be. Just a list of just some of the behaviors that impact on whether we're perceived as being professional or not. All of these aspects are just as applicable if you are working in the academic environment or in industry. It doesn't matter whether you continue your career in academia or whether you work on a mine or whether you go into consulting. These professional behaviors are going to be expected of you. In fact, they're going to be applicable even if you move out of the direct geoscience field. This quote in the Sunday Times some years ago again highlights the need for professional conduct and to think about what it is that we are doing. Too many of our species will act corruptly if they think they can get away with it. So let's have a look at some of the types of things that might influence our professionalism. You can be sure that if you're involved with mining, you are at some stage going to come face to face with interference from some political group. What about Sequent? Is it creditable? Yes. Sequent is, a number of their courses have been accredited both with the GSSA and with SACNASP. So in dealing with undue influence, sometimes it's going to be political interference. But more often it is going to be direct pressure or indirect pressure exerted by various stakeholders. Maybe it's your company boss or corporate shareholders wanting to maximize profits. Or it might be local communities, your suppliers or subcontractors, each one having their own personal agenda. What happens when the company or the client asks you to write a favorable report? They might even want to pay you extra for it, even though you know the project is rubbish. Thinking through this, if you don't do as they request, you might not get paid. Or at the very least, you won't be asked to do another job for this client. Probably one of the most difficult situations to deal with here is when you have to make a choice between doing a job that you're not quite capable of doing and not doing the job at all. And this is particularly difficult if you're unemployed at the time. So how you deal with all of these issues says a lot about your professional attitude. Again, working as a geoscientist, you are going to be, at some stage in your career, privy to confidential company information. For example, you may know that your company is just about to open a new mine that's going to cause their stock price to rise. Or you might come to know that they're going to be taken over by a foreign company, and so the stock is going to go down the toilet. Acting on this information that you know to either buy or sell shares in that company is insider trading. So again, if you buy or sell shares in any company based on information that is not available to the general public, that is insider trading and is illegal. But at the same time, these same insider trading regulations don't prevent you from holding shares in the company that you work for. Some companies might specify the number of shares that you can hold without declaring it. But generally, the normal investor will hold shares as part of a greater portfolio or one that is managed by an investment company. It's only if you are using information that is not in the public domain that this applies. Important also to remember that these regulations don't only apply to you, but it would also prevent you from passing information on to your parents or your family that they can buy shares in the company due to information that you are privy to. Research integrity. This is not just an academic concept. Over your career, you're going to be doing quite a lot of research in various aspects. You're going to work with other colleagues on various reports, whether it be for a particular employer or for clients. You would want to make sure that you would present accurate results, not just the results that you know they want you to write. You might even be involved in reviewing academic theses or journal articles. Be fair and honest, even if you don't necessarily agree with their conclusions. And by this, I mean on a personal basis, not a factual basis. And finally, how you interact with people that you're working with, how you deal with real or potential conflicts of interest says a lot about your professionalism. We all know that plagiarism is seen as being one of the most unforgivable academic sins. Well, plagiarism in the work environment is no more acceptable, and all the same rules exist. So here we have a few examples of plagiarism that is specific to the workplace. How we deal with intellectual property. Whose idea was it? Taking content from a website without proper citation. When we do presentations, we often do a search on Google, pick up an image and drop it into our presentation. Please make sure you attribute that, because that itself is plagiarism. If we use other companies' brandings, or even reusing our own work, without acknowledging the original source. Copyrights. Infringing copyrights is so easy. You just photocopy the chapter. And we all justify this because, well, the price of books is just so ridiculous. We can't afford to buy the book. We're either students or we're unemployed or just started working, and we've got so many other important expenses. Copyright infringement is not only an ethical issue, it is also a legal issue, and it can have significant financial implications. And then just a thought on artificial intelligence. Using GPT, any sort of AI GPT, important thing to remember is calm your inner Luddite and hold on to your inner skeptic. The Luddites were members of a movement in the 19th century by the English textile workers. They opposed the use of automated machinery, and so they went around destroying it. Don't be afraid of technology. Don't be afraid of using artificial intelligence. It has amazing uses. Be aware of the potential ethical and plagiarism issues that it can have. And also note that if you're working in an area where there is little research, AI is not going to be all that accurate. So be very careful about mindless cut and paste. Use AI, but always be critical of the output. There's no such thing as the computer made me do it. With respect to harassment, bullying, and discrimination, it is never okay. There are all manner of places where people can turn to highlight it, to identify it, to complain against it. Even the GSSA has a stand on harassment. Please do not fall foul to this, and don't ever go into being part of that phase. With respect to sexual harassment, and in the mining industry, this is a lot more prevalent than we would like to believe. So for both ladies and gentlemen, always treat your colleagues with respect and dignity that you would like them to treat you and the rest of your family. And finally, treat everyone the way you would like to be treated, especially those who cannot advance your career. So for the people who work in your office, who make the tea, who keep the lawns tidy, how do you treat those people as well? Then the last question, is it always discrimination? Is it always discrimination if you don't get the job you applied for, or if you don't get the promotion that you think you deserve? You always need to consider the possibility that sometimes you are just not the best person for that job or that promotion, that the other person got it on merit. Mentoring. This is a very special way of contributing to the continuity of education of the next generation. And it's something that we encourage all professionals to volunteer for. There are many professional bodies that have formal structures for mentoring, the list of them there, and even the larger companies often have formal mentoring programs. But probably the greatest amount of mentoring, coaching, and training takes place in informal settings. Now, in any program, we always have far more applications for mentees than we have got mentors. And that's why I have included this mantra down here that was first coined in the surgery field. See one, do one, teach one. So make yourself available for mentorship, initially as a mentee. Then Take time to build your career and gain experience, but don't forget to volunteer as a mentor to help the next generation. The GSSA is always looking for mentors to assist with their mentorship program. If you feel that you can be available for 1 year or for more, please just send an email to info@GSSA and mark it for the attention of the mentorship program. Networking. Well, this is the process of making connections and building relationships. And it's one of the skills that we have lost a lot of since lockdown. A certain amount of networking can be done through social media. But if you really want to develop relationships that last throughout a career, you do need to get involved in physical networking. And the GSSA has a number of in-person events, conferences and so forth. We also put up specialized networking opportunities. Please make an effort to come. It's like online dating. Eventually you have to meet in real life. And so we would like to encourage you to come to these in-person events to build your network. Dress code and time management are some things that we don't often think of with respect to professional behaviors. So 2 questions that you need to ask yourself when you get dressed in the morning. Does what you wear say anything about your competence? How well you're able to do your job? And I am going to put up a poll. Okay, so the 2 questions is, does how you dress say anything about your competence? And does how you dress say anything about your professionalism? So you can see there the results of the poll, how people think. So the first question that we asked was, does what you wear say anything about your competence? And the short answer is no. What you wear has nothing to do with how good you are at doing your job. But the second question, does how you dress say anything about your professionalism? And the answer there is yes. However, there is nothing to say that a professional always wears a suit or a skirt and heels. It has to do with what is appropriate for the job at hand. So if you're out in the field doing field mapping, if you pitch up in your suit, not going to be very useful. But at the same time, it's also not appropriate to pitch up to a prestigious gala dinner where you might be accepting an award if you're wearing your shorts and t-shirt. The way we dress is also important when we do in-person presentations or going for a job interview. You must be the star of the show, not what you're wearing. Remember, in the mining industry, you're typically going to be asking somebody for money at some stage. So being more conservative is generally more appropriate because the people you are going to be speaking to, investors, bankers, lawyers, senior management, they don't care anything about your individual style. They want to hear the professional you. There's nothing wrong with expressing your individuality through fashion in private, but unless you're presenting in front of a hip, fashionable audience, which the mining industry is not, it's best to stick to a more formal professional dress code. Nowadays, we spend a lot of time in video conferences. Even with contact events coming back into fashion, you're still going to spend a lot of time in virtual events or having online meetings with colleagues and clients all over the world. Dress the same as you would in real meetings. or at least that portion which people can see. Make sure you put your name and your surname. If it's an internal meeting with colleagues, then your given name is generally uncanny. But in a multicultural situation, please distinguish between your name and your surname, because some cultures put the surname first and the given name second, or your given name first and your surname second. And it's not always easy for people to know which is which. So one of the easiest ways of distinguishing it is to put your surname in capitals, whether it is before or afterwards. When you join a meeting, please keep your microphone muted, because there might be a conversation going on when you enter into the video conference, and you don't want to interrupt. When it comes to the use of video, look at what is happening in terms of local usage. Very often, people like to have their videos on. It's easier to have a conversation with a person that you can see rather than just having a heart-to-heart with your computer. But in some parts of the world, and particularly here in Africa, we have issues with bandwidth. And so we don't want to prevent other people from being able to stay attached to the video conference. So look at what the local etiquette is. How we manage our time also says a lot about how we are perceived with respect to being on time. Are you on time, or are you that guy who is always late for everything? No matter what time the meeting is, you're always coming 10 minutes late. Or do you always log into a virtual meeting late? Sure, there are reasons sometimes when you're not able to get in on time. But what I'm talking about here is, do you have a habit of being late? Do you complete your tasks on time? Or does your supervisor always have to go running after you to get things handed in? Do you pay attention and contribute during meetings? Are you present in the meeting, or do you spend all your time texting on your phone or doing something else? And this can be a real challenge during virtual meetings, where we all tend to do at least half a dozen things while we're listening to somebody in a meeting. Are we productive and efficient? Being productive is not just about getting a certain amount of work done. It's also about using less to create more, to work smarter and not just harder. Finally, how do we manage our time productively and efficiently while working remotely? Whether it's working from home or when you're working in the field. Well, in our lives, there are things that are important and there are things that are urgent. The Eisenhower principle tells us that what is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important. We can divide pretty much everything in our lives into one of these four quadrants. So we want to ask ourselves, in managing our time, where do we spend most of our time? We need to analyze our own life and prioritize accordingly. It's the only way to get everything done. I'm sure most of you will have seen this experiment where you take a large glass jar and fill it with sand, rocks, water, and pebbles. And how much you get into that jar says much about your professionalism. For example, if you put the sand and the small rocks first and the large rocks on top, things don't fit in. But if you put the large rocks in first and then fill up the spaces with sands and pebbles, you get a lot more in the jar. So how do you fill your jar? To get the best out of a limited amount of time, we need to get our priorities right. First, we want to schedule the important tasks, which are represented by the rocks. Then we put in the pebbles, the important and urgent tasks. Then the sand. This is the myriads of things that we've got in our lives that distract us from the big issues. Things like leisure activities and other unimportant, non-urgent time wasters, including checking our social media, hanging out at the mall with our colleagues and friends. Yes, all the things that we would much rather be doing than work. There's a place for all of these things, but that is not first place. So once you've filled your jar with the priorities and everything else, if you took some water and poured it into the jar, there'd still be place. Meaning there is always time for a beer with your buddies after you put the rocks in first. Okay, so we've had a brief look at registration, CPD, and professional conduct. The next session, we will have a look at ethics. And so I suggest we take a 15-minute break before we come back, clear the cobwebs. So we will start again at 10:30. If there are any questions, I'll take them now as well. Okay, so the next section is we start having a look at ethics. And as an introduction to this, I'd like you to consider this ethical dilemma. It's a thought experiment that's been around since the late 60s. And it involves a trolley bus hurtling down the tracks. There is no driver. There's no automatic way of stopping it. This trolley is heading downhill and it will continue. Okay, let's just pause there for a second. There's a question. How do organizations get their courses and certifications registered? Many times, high quality courses don't come up to the list of registered options, probably should. Organizations who want to get their courses certified or accredited have to apply to SACNAS. SACNAS will then go through all the documentation that they provide, and then they will provide a certification that the course can provide those CPD credits. If you have specific questions on that, send me a mail and I can assist you directly. There's a question regarding, again, CPD points for doing your daily job. You cannot claim CPD points for doing your daily job. Things that you do in addition to your daily job that you can claim CPD credits for. So if your day job is lecturing, you cannot claim CPD credits for lecturing. If your day job is about writing a competent persons report, all the research that you put into writing that competent persons report and compiling it, that's part of your day job. You get paid for it. You cannot claim CPD credits for it. Okay, so we go back to our ethical dilemma. Our trolley bus is hurtling down the road. If it continues to go straight, there are 5 people on the tracks who would be killed. However, there is a siding and there's 1 person down there. You are standing here next to the lever. You can either let the lever be as it is and the trolley bus will continue down its trajectory, or you can pull the lever and send it down the siding, in which case this person will be killed and those 5 people will remain safe. Question I want you to think about in your own mind is, what will you do? Will you just let the train go by, or will you pull the lever? Then, to make it more difficult, would you make the same decision if this 1 person was a child or an old person? Would it make it a difference if you knew this person and those 5 were strangers? What about if these are just random civilian passers-by and this one is a worker on the railway? What if these 5 people were workers on the railway and this one is a trespasser? Would you make a different decision if these folks were of a different race or tribe or gender or nationality? Is there a difference between allowing someone to die or making a positive choice to kill somebody? The next step in the dilemma is, okay, it's hurtling down the road, there's a bridge, there's a very large person on the bridge, and yourself. Do you push the fat man off the bridge in the hope that he will derail the train? Is there any difference between pushing the fat man off the bridge and flipping the switch, as in the previous slide? Or would you jump onto the tracks yourself to try and derail the train and save some of the people? There is no right answer to any of these questions. I say this dilemma has been about since the late 1960s, and no one has ever been able to give an answer which is correct. But the way in which you reasoned to get your answers, whatever it may have been, is a result of your ethics. Now, by way of background, there is a hierarchy to ethics. The top, we have meta-ethics, and this is a branch of metaphysical philosophy, which we're not going to get into. But suffice to say that it deals with what is the nature of right and wrong? Who gets to decide what is right and what is wrong? And should one culture's notion of justice or rightness be imposed upon somebody else's? The second level of ethics is normative ethics, and this deals with how we make decisions as to what is right and what is wrong in our own lives. So just for interest, here are some of the most common theories of how people make ethical decisions. The first and simplest one is, well, what's in my best interest? I'm going to make a decision that makes me happy. So in our trolley bus example, if we knew one of the people that was going to be killed by the train and we made the opposite decision, we may have reasoned, I'm going to make this decision in my interest because I know the person. Or we could have considered a different way of looking at things. What will bring the greatest good for all stakeholders? Maybe you would have made the decision to kill one person to save 5. Another way of making a decision is, well, you select the most moral choice. Well, that comes back to whose moral choice? Then there are other theories such as, are you going to do something because you want to be an exemplary person, to show care for others in the community? Another way of making decisions is to look at an outside source for ethical guidance. Would you look at your religious beliefs? Would that influence how you made decisions? Or would you look at a political figure, make your decisions based on party politics? Or would you look at a local celebrity and make your decisions according to what you think they would do? Other people would make decisions based on what they think, not concerned about anybody else, but what you feel is right. Irrespective of how we make our decisions, defining what is right and wrong is a very different thing. Because this makes us look at a situation and make a value judgment. That value judgment is often subjective, and it depends on things such as our background, our culture, our religious convictions, historical experiences, and so forth. We look at such concepts as fairness and justice, but these are not all easy to define because we have different life experiences, different backgrounds. This is going to impact on how we view what is fair and just. So that brings us to the question, well, who is right? How do we operate in a society where everybody makes decisions for different reasons? And everybody makes different kinds of reasons or different kinds of decisions in the same circumstance? Well, that could become totally chaotic if we did that. So the employer or the organization that you work for would step in and create a set of accepted norms for that society or for that group. And this is where we come to the world of applied ethics. Applied ethics looks at looking at different theories and principles and how they apply to specific real-life situations. On a more day-to-day scale, the ethics that we generally deal with are known as professional ethics. So it's the structured world of the registered geoscientist. These professional ethics are based on various principles of geoethics or applied ethics. In an organization, it would be obligatory if you were part of that organization, and it would generally be backed by a complaints and disciplinary process. Now, this slide here shows some of the issues that we're likely to deal with in our careers. And believe me when I say to you that you will encounter some of these, if not all of them, over your years as a geoscientist. So in the world of professional ethics, we have a hierarchy of codes. At the top, we have what is generally called the Code of Ethics. It's often referred to as a value statement. So it behaves like a constitution with general principles that are there to guide our behavior. It's a set of principles that affects decision-making. Then we have the Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct takes a clause in the Code of Ethics and applies it to a host of specific situations. So, for example, you might have a statement in the Code of Ethics that employees must obey the law. The Code of Conduct will list specific laws that the employee needs to come to terms with. And then we have the Code of Practice. These are specific to a practice or a competency. A company will only have one code of ethics, but it may have many codes of practice. And the codes of practice are generally supported by industry standards, guidance notes, best practice recommendations, and they typically relate to things like codes and standards relating to resource and reserve estimation, mine health and safety, risk management, employment equity, and such like features. One of the codes of practice that is most applicable to us as geoscience professionals is the SIM codes. And I'm highlighting this one because it is going to be important in guiding what you as geoscientists do. There is a recording of SAM codes on YouTube. It is free to watch. Please go and have a look at it. We also have a number of SIM officers both on the GSSA and SAIMM websites please have a look at that. And at the end of the month, there is the Introduction to SAM Codes course through the GSSA. It's also a celebration of 25 years, 25th anniversary of the SAM Code. Okay, so now whichever organization we happen to belong to, whether it be a statutory body, whether it be a professional organization, or whether it be a company, they will each have their own code of conduct. And they're generally not going to differ that much. There might be differences in specifics, but the general code is going to be very similar. So what happens if we transgress and go against the accepted norm? We can do this by accident, or we can do this by choice because we don't agree with what's happening. Most organizations are going to have a process whereby people can complain, where there will be a disciplinary process in order to enforce what the codes say. And this is typically a condition of your membership to that body or a condition of employment. In the GSSA and SACNAS, there is a code of conduct, and there is also a complaints and disciplinary procedure. Anybody can lodge a complaint against a member with reference to the code of conduct. Most of these cases are dealt with internally by the GSSA, but if it's significantly serious, it can be passed on to SACNAS or even to the judicial system. And an example of one of these, some years ago, a member was expelled for criminal conduct. He had killed his wife. And so that was passed on to the, it came from the criminal side. The purpose of complaints is not to beat people about the ears and to punish honest mistakes. It is there to improve behaviors. It's a self-regulatory process. In other words, it gets done within the organization. It doesn't involve lawyers or anything like that. What I want to highlight here is that the complaints process is not a forum to settle private scores or professional differences of personal opinion. It is there to deal with serious issues. Don't use it to make a petty complaint or to settle your differences of opinion with people. And unfortunately, we do see quite a bit of that. But before one even gets to the complaints process, there are many informal ways of dealing with any issue that we have before the situation gets out of hand. Act like a grown-up. Approach the person directly. Take somebody who both parties respect. And again, don't get personal. So you have a brief look then at the GSSA Code of Ethics. Ethical leadership is imperative, irrespective of the role that you play, whether it be in the workplace or at home. Ethical behavior is about so much more than just following a set of rules. It's also about complying with ethical principles in all aspects of your professional and personal life. And as you go through life, you will encounter situations where there are no hard and fast rules. Or the rules might not be sufficiently clear, and you might need to make your own decision. Responsible professionals must be willing to look at each situation, identify the ethical issues, and then create solutions to them. The GSSA Code of Ethics is benchmarked against other international geoscience organizations. And if you are a member of the GSSA, it means you are obligated to comply with the Code of Professional Conduct. So what the preamble to the code tells us is that if there are breaches without dishonesty, without intent, these are minor contraventions and generally result in personal counseling or admonition, all done privately. If, however, there are more serious breaches, it can give rise to suspension or expulsion from the society. And in all my years with the GSSA, I know of only 2 who have been expelled from the society. And most of the breaches that we look at very seriously is gross professional incompetence, misconduct, unethical behavior, professional defamation, and also criminal conduct. So clause 1 tells that you have a responsibility for the members for the welfare, health, and safety of the community. And this comes before responsibility to the profession. That is our overarching clause. The details, you would want to avoid anything that creates a conflict of interest, or even the perception of a conflict of interest. Make certain that you work to acceptable standards so that you're not going to jeopardize public welfare, health, or safety. Maintain your technological services. Promote the well-being of the community. Look at the next sentence here. It says, if your judgment is overruled in this matter, should inform your client or employer of the possible consequences. That can be a difficult one. But if you know that something you are doing is going to cause a problem for the community, you have an obligation in terms of the Code of Ethics to tell somebody in a responsible position about it. Clause 2, act so as to uphold and enhance the honesty, honor, integrity, and dignity of the profession. So what that means is you wouldn't get involved with anything that is known to be fraudulent or dishonest. You wouldn't association with others to conceal unethical acts. You wouldn't continue in partnership, professional partnership, with persons who have been removed from the society for unprofessional conduct. And if you're called upon to give professional advice, you would provide an objective and reliable opinion to the best of your ability. Do not take on the functions of an expert in fields other than your own, or accept professional obligations that you are not competent to discharge. So when you're doing a job, make sure that you inform either your employer or your client if the job that you are doing requires qualifications or experience outside of your field of competence. So you wouldn't do a job for which you personally were not entirely qualified to do. You wouldn't describe yourself as and act as a consultant or a contractor unless you have the relevant registration or membership or being able to do it. And you wouldn't give any professional opinion without being thoroughly informed as to what the situation is. Build your professional reputation on merit and not compete unfairly. Effectively, what this means is you're going to not promote yourself above and beyond what your actual abilities are. And if somebody else has been employed, either on a full-time basis or a consulting basis, you wouldn't undermine them. You wouldn't try and supplant them once they have been appointed. You wouldn't falsify or misrepresent your own qualifications or your associates. And you wouldn't do anything to maliciously or carelessly injure the reputation or business of somebody else. Even if you're in competition with them, you would still be professional about their abilities. You would exercise due restraint in explaining your work, and you wouldn't unfairly and unjustly criticize others. Give proper credit where it is due. Refrain from plagiarism and use circumspect advertising. Apply your skill and knowledge in the interests of your employer or your client. Avoid known or potential conflicts of interest. If a conflict of interest does arise, inform your employer, inform your client. It may not be a big deal and you can continue doing what you are doing, but make it known to everybody concerned. You would want to be impartial in the administration of any contract, to not accept compensation from more than one party for services on the same project, unless the circumstances are fully disclosed to and agreed to by all interested parties. So you don't do one job for two different clients and get paid twice for it, unless they both know about it. Neither solicit nor accept financial or other valuable considerations. In other words, bribery is out. And the same thing with accepting gratuities from contractors and so forth. Advise your client or employer when, as a result of your studies, you believe that a project will not be viable. One wouldn't take on a contracting job and say, well, I'm doing the job. I know it's not going to go anywhere. I know it's a waste of time, but I'm going to do it anyway because I need the work. That is contradicting. The use of confidential information gained in the course of your employment and destroying documents that might be required for the verification of your work. If you need to give an opinion, give evidence, make sure that it is done in an objective and truthful manner on the basis of adequate knowledge. So again, it will be objective, it will be accurate, it will be done on the basis of adequate knowledge. And if you have any interest in the project, make it known. Clause 7 shows the importance of continuing professional development because it is written into the Code of Professional Conduct that members shall continue their professional development throughout their careers and also assist others in that endeavor as well. Where members are involved in preparing public reports, members must comply with all laws and government regulations relating to the mineral industries and also comply with the rules, regulations, and practices as established and promulgated by the stock exchange. And when we look at the detail of this has specific reference to, do you meet the requirements of a competent person if you are writing or signing off on a document for the Johannesburg Stock Exchange? But not only local laws, make sure that you know all the laws and regulations related to the minerals industry in South Africa, but also in other countries where you might be working as a consultant. And this again highlights it to comply with all the relevant laws and regulations of any country where you are working. And this requires that we think very carefully about some of the work that we might be doing in other countries. If the rules of the country we're working in are very lax, or maybe contribute basic human rights. If you're working in an area where you arrive on site and you see they're making use of child labor, what decision do you make regarding that? Or if where you are prospecting is in a river valley, these are all the things you need to consider. Okay, so now we've gone through the code of conduct. I'd like to look at a number of case studies. I'm going to give you a scenario, and you can think for yourself how you act under each of these circumstances. So the first one deals with somebody plans a dinner at an expensive restaurant and plans to expense it. What would you do? What decision would you make? Would you go along and say, well, they're organizing it, they're making the project pay for it, it's okay? Remember, it's each person's decision as to what they will do. But expensing dinners like this is likely to become known to management. You're hiring and you've got two candidates. One candidate is in her late 40s with children, and the other is a recent graduate. Both are qualified for the position. CFO believes that the candidate who is older with the responsibility of children is more likely to be committed to the company long term and is probably the right choice. Is this reason good enough to hire this person? The employment equity standard tells us that we are not allowed to hire someone based on protected characteristics such as age, gender, or ethnicity. While this person might be the best candidate, we cannot link it to the fact that they are older and they've got children. Any decision needs to be based on the qualifications and on merit. The nature of your work requires frequent travel, and you sit and look at information regarding customers and projects at the airport or the train or the bus. What are the things that you need to keep in mind? Remember to take appropriate steps to protect the confidentiality of the information. You never know who's sitting next to you or across the road from you who might use that information for one or other reason. And when having a business conversation, telephone conversation in a public place, don't talk as if the whole world can hear you. Remember confidentiality. Is it okay to provide business contact information? Under the POPI Act, any business contact information is personal data and should not be given out to anybody who is not entitled to it. So that is one of the reasons why, for example, the GSSA doesn't hand out lists of attendees of conferences with contact information. That used to be done years ago. It was a great way of improving your networking. But since the POPI Act came in, you're not allowed to hand out personal contact details without the permission of the individual whose contact you are passing on. If you notice a racially offensive comment from a co-worker on a social media site, what do? First thing you need is take it up with the co-worker. Speak to him directly. You may also want to take it up with your supervisor or HR or anything like that, but take it up with the co-worker first. Give him the opportunity to put it right. And this is something that we all come across working outside of South Africa. You're working on a big project and you need various bits of approval, and it takes forever and nothing happens and everything is stalled. Do you offer a gift or a paid trip to a nearby beach resort? Or do you just sit back and let the project stall? This is very definitely a bribe scenario and is not permitted under most company policies. Take it up with somebody more senior. A vendor who works with your business unit invites you for a weekend hunting trip. These are some of the things that you'd need to consider. What is the value of the invitation that you've received? Does it give the appearance of bias? In other words, if you accepted this invitation, would the vendor expect that to influence your next decision to give future work to them? If so, perhaps you should reconsider the invitation. Is there anything wrong with hiring a family member who might be looking for a job? Of course, one needs to realize that if you did that, it would create the appearance of a conflict of interest. What do you do if the senior people in charge then say the bribe is necessary? Do you defer to their choice or take this matter to authorities or outside authority? Easiest thing to do is to pass it back to the senior person and get them to do it. If that's their ethics, then that's their responsibility. But coming back to nepotism, the family member might be perfectly qualified for the position. They might be the best person for the position. So instead of you doing the hiring, disclose this relationship to your senior so that they know that this person is a relative of yours. And they can then make the decision as to whether that person should be hired. If you see someone report work that hasn't been done, again, raise it with that person directly first. You might want to take it further as well, depending upon the circumstance. But again, raise it with the individual first. Here you're working on a project. Okay, send me a question. This is something that does happen from time to time. You're working on a project and the customer, the client, may have made an error which increases the costs for them. You look at it. The client has given you this information. Do you just let it slide? Your company gets more money. What do you do? It might mean more money for you on this particular project. But if you raise it with the customer or the client, they are likely to come back to you a second time because of your honesty. So you've been working on a project, a really exciting project, and you go to lunch with a friend of yours. You talk to them about this project. What should you do? Remember, this now goes back to insider trading or potential insider trading. Because if you talk to anybody outside of the company about non-public information, they could buy stock in their company. They could have an advantage because they've now got information that other investors don't have. Again, you've been working on a really exciting project. You attend a conference and you meet up with somebody who now works for a competition or competitor company. So you invite them to dinner, you guys go out, have a beer or so, catch up on life and whatever else is happening. What do you need to keep in mind? Again, you can catch up on personal matters, but don't talk about what your company is doing in any specific detail. And likewise, you wouldn't ask them specific details about what they are doing. you're going to send equipment out of a country to another country, and you know that these things need to be licensed or they need to be approved for export, and you're not sure that this has been done, please make sure to guess. Don't assume that things have been done. Don't assume that it's not your business. Make sure that you understand everything that applies to what the work is that you are doing. Just some final words here. Specifically this one. Takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you'll do things differently. And so that's where we end. And I would just like to pay tribute to our annual sponsors, which makes these free events available to all of us. So at this stage, if there are any questions on any topic that we've discussed so far, please, we can address those now. We will send you all of the slides so that you'll have them as reference. You can also download the GSSA Code of Conduct as well as the SACNAS Code of Conduct from the relevant websites. And you will receive a certificate of attendance so that you can upload it to the CPD. Well, thank you all very much for your attendance, and we hope to see you at one or other of the GSSA events in the not too distant future. And if anybody has any specific questions, please, you're welcome to email me directly.